Whoa, we are back for another episode of the Home Advantage Interview Podcast. Today we have another interview coming at you. Today Mason Beckman and Tony Rotundo got to interview Joe Williamson, formerly known as Joe Flo, and he is now running Gro Wrestling. It's a company that he manages to try to grow the sport through events and media coverage and stuff like that. He was really the beginning of FloWrestling when they started in 2006, and so he kind of helped Martin Floriani grow that media nation that we know today. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. Mason and Tony did a great job, and it's going to be really entertaining. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Let's let it roll.
All right, we got quite the cast of characters today. Joining me is the website sponsor, the man, the myth, the legend that is Tony Rotundo, and one of the fathers of internet wrestling media, the way that we cover wrestling today, Missouri Tiger, current head of Gro Wrestling, Joe Williamson.
What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, man. Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good. Trying to stay sane. Doing stuff like this really helps. We're stuck at home most of the day. So I'm pretty pumped to be with you guys.
How are Jack and Lauren doing?
Good. Today's been a little more rough when it rains and there's a soccer field down the street. I can take Jack there, run some energy out of him, and then things are normal. But it's been raining here all day, and so he's been stuck inside. So hopefully it's cleared up enough I can take him out there after this, so he doesn't drive us both bonkers. And Rourke's doing well. We got another kid on the way, so that's a big thing coming up. End of September, a few days before our first big event of the year. And Jack's birthday's tomorrow, so trying to figure out how to make that special for him.
Yeah. Right on.
That's awesome, man. So,
congrats.
You've had a pretty incredible life through the sport to this point, right? And obviously you're far from done, but and there's so much to it that people that maybe isn't super public knowledge or hasn't the story that hasn't been told through larger outlets. But go back to how did you get started in wrestling? Where did it all kind of start for you, and at what point do you think you looked at it and went, man, this sport, this is what I love to do. This is what I think I want to do long term.
Yeah, I mean, some of my earliest memories were laying down on a mat next to my brother, watching my dad coach Kickapoo High School in Springfield. It was, those first moments you look back, all those guys that he was coaching, then they're like kings, Probably they were not that good at wrestling. But, it used to be fun in there, and going to events. I mean, we spent, even before we were wrestling, we were spending our weekends in a wrestling gym. The coach's kid, and then I think I loved my brother and I. We grew up together, and I was into wrestling a little bit, before he was. I was really pumped, and probably just because, what do I associate it with? Hanging out with my family, going to tournaments and wrestling, playing kickball in between matches. Most of my friends I made through wrestling, and so just associating wrestling with happy times. Yeah. So, at what point do you think in your development you looked at it and went I think I can and I think I want to wrestle in college? Everybody kind of has that moment of clarity where man, this is just something I did as a kid for fun, and then hey, this is kind of what I do. Well, I don't think there was ever a time that I thought I would stop wrestling. Yeah. I don't think I could tell you the time where I thought I wanted to do that, because I don't think I could tell you a time that I would have said I wouldn't wrestle. It was kind of like a part of my identity. Growing up, and it was something that, over time you work harder and harder, you start getting those really good feelings, sometimes really bad ones, but either way,
a feeling that impacts you. So, keeps you alive almost. So I would say I got into it at a higher level. Maybe in 7th and 8th grade, I started going to work out at the high school, and then, I'm one of the tougher guys in the room, so I thought that was cool, and I knew I was a little bit, I had something going on, something that I was going to be good at it. Yeah.
So, you go through your high school career, and, at the time that you would have gone through your recruiting process and would have really made your decision, you end up at Missouri, not far from home relative to, some other place you could have gone. But what people, Missouri is one of those programs now that's become such a mainstay at that highest level. And the Missouri program that recruited you was a very different Missouri program. The time that you grew up around the program, and then you decided to go there. So what was it about Mizzou, about Coach Smith, that you decided to go to Mizzou? And just talk about your time there, man. You went through a changing of a program.
Yeah, so I think I was a junior in high school. Missouri knocked off Illinois. It was like a first really, really big win, and it was news, like the program's going somewhere. Around that same time, they're starting to have a fewer individuals, All-American, Spates and Tyron Woodley. I didn't look at a whole lot of schools. In fact, my junior year in high school, I didn't wrestle the whole season. I got hurt, ended up having surgery a few times, and it was a tough comeback. And the next year, I only finished, I finished 3rd place. And so it's not like my phone was ringing off the hook for people that want to get the dude that got 3rd at state. But when I went to Missouri, I had a teammate, Jeff Faust, who was a Big 12 champ, who had gone to University of Missouri. And so, I did go out several times before, like I was recruiting, go up there and get to meet the guys and hang out. And so that was really cool. And then it was also just like a really good location for me. My dad lived in St. Louis. My mom lived in Kansas City. It's right there in the middle. So, I got a nice safety net there.
Yeah.
And then the school's good. I knew that I would get a good education there. So, probably a combo of those things. And I knew I wanted to try and go D1. And so, any other school I was talking to, they were smaller schools, and I just, see if I could do it at that level.
So Brian Smith is, I think, arguably the most under-discussed, underrated coach in Division I wrestling, especially when you talk about program builders, right? Again, it's been a while since he had to build Missouri, but I don't think people realize how far they've come under his tutelage. But talk about Coach Smith, what he was, what it was like wrestling for him, and what it is about him, and the invention, the creation of Tiger Style, right? That everybody knows now. But talk about Coach Smith and why you think he's been able to be just so incredibly successful.
Yeah, well, he's a way different coach today than he was when I was there. And, because he was developing from, the ground level, and I thought he was kind of insane, but if you want to somebody that really felt it, Mark Bader. I think Mark was there. He was either there for 1 year with Roper, that was before Smith, or maybe it was the first year. But the team, when Smith took over, at one point they were down to 9 wrestlers, and I think Smith was like, he was cleaning house.
Yeah.
So only a few people that could handle the culture change stayed there. But I remember Mark telling me things like they all got eliminated day 1 at the Vegas in Cliff Keen, and Smith drove them like 8 miles out into the cold desert, dropped him off, and said, "I'll see you back at the hotel." And
wow,
that's awesome.
It's good today. Like he seems very laid back, which blows my mind. But I think it's a little bit different when you're getting blue chippers versus getting not the highest pedigree wrestlers coming out of college. So he had to do what he needed to, I think, to get the right guys off the team and make the guys that were going to be able to grow. And anyways, I would say Smith is an innovator. He's and he's a CEO. He's always had good assistant coaches around him. He works really hard for the success that he has. And I don't think he's taken his foot off the pedal. Maybe his attitude and some of the ways he coaches changes, but he's still got fire in his belly.
Yeah. I've had some conversations with him at some different points that make that very, very clear. It's like you said, his demeanor is so calm. It's almost like the duck on the pond, right? What you see on the surface is so much different. And talking to Joe Johnston at one point, I asked him about Smith. Joe, Iowa guy that's known for being one of the hardest working people out there. And the first words out of Joe's mouth were, "I've never seen somebody that works that hard."
Yeah, absolutely. Oh shoot, what was I going to say? I had like a really good point, and it slipped my mind, Mason.
Joe, I got a quick question just in terms of like that recruiting process. Were you kind of a hard-nosed wrestler like that? I mean, you're one of the sweetest people I know. And so like were you like grit and grind and like just not just hard work, but like were you kind of mean on the mat or like what did he see in you to bring you on?
Well, I would say I wasn't a great wrestler. I wasn't the strongest, fastest. But I think when my heart was in it, I had as much effort and I did everything I could to get better. It was important to me, and yeah, I would just say I wasn't gonna give up. I don't know what else to say. I wrestled year round for the most part. Went to camps, went to every practice I could. Found good workout partners, and it got me to a decent level. I was never starting in college. Just a good workout partner for Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was going to ask about next, man, is you were teammates and right in the wheelhouse of a couple of guys that, I mean, Woodley was an All-American. Askren made 4 finals and won 2 titles. First national champ ever at Mizzou. And Woodley, obviously, being a UFC champ, 2 guys that are Hall of Famers as far as Missouri athletics go. But for your program, put Missouri wrestling on the map. So, talk about your relationship with those guys and what it was like. Obviously, it's never ideal not being the guy that is breaking those barriers, but to be part of the team and the group that proved you can win a national title at Missouri and prove that you can do all those things.
Yeah, and there was other guys. Matt Pell was also in my class.
Yeah, I remember him.
A little bit older, was All-American. Kenny Burleson, just a little younger than me, is Raymond Jordan.
Yep.
And I remember my buddy Faust, when I was telling you, a high school teammate. This is before like you could just go watch tons of matches and find out a lot about people. Like, dude, this guy Ben Askren is coming. He's right around your weight too, and really hyped him up. I remember the first time I saw him, actually, I was like, this guy? He just did not look that impressive. At the time, I probably lifted too much weights and could have substituted some time wrestling, because I think that's what Ben did. But yeah, he just didn't look tough. And so, fast forward to, the season starting, he beat me up pretty good. But the thing about him is it just kept, he just kept getting better and better and better and better and better. you'd see things like, I'd go over, I live pretty close, and Pell and Askren lived together. We'd have already had like 2 workouts that, like, maybe like a strength training in the morning and wrestling in the afternoon. And then they're just on mat, or play wrestling now. I didn't even know what that was then, but I know that they're there, they're working on technique, and they're sweating, and it's kind of like, whoa, you're doing this for a third time in the day. Pell was the same way. Just that group of guys. I said I had a good workout partner from. They sharpened each other like crazy, and I think very smart about how they did it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is so incredibly overlooked is, a roster's so much more than the 10 guys in the lineup, right? Or even the, if you've got an elite team, the 5 or 6 guys that can make the podium, right? I can think about the teams that I was on in college. You run through the people that we call glue guys, right? People that really keep the roster together. So it's always interesting to hear the stories. And I know I've talked to you about your time in Missouri a little bit before, but the perspective on these guys that people remember the names and the faces, but you saw a totally different side of a guy like Askren. But when do you think for Askren specifically, when do you think was the first time that you really thought like this dude might be different?
Well, I remember him. I remember some guys that would beat him up a little bit when we were freshmen, and by the time wrestle-offs happened, he won this. He won the match, and I was like, dang, that was pretty quick from going from probably a guy's going to major you to, I think he won an overtime match against this guy Matt Turner, who was really tough, but he beat Robbie Waller at the Missouri Open when we were freshmen. Robbie Waller won a national title that year, and I remember after Waller won, just thinking like, "Dang, the chubby kid is really good." Then you're not supposed to beat national champs and All-Americans, several months into your college career. And he's also the guy, I know it happens more and more now. I think kids are coming out of high school and they're better, but he's the one that wouldn't wrestle in the freshman sophomore division at open tournaments and win. I also remember this match. It was at Missouri Open. I don't know who he was wrestling, but the dude looked like He-Man, just like the most ripped alpha male looking guy that you could see. And Ben made him quit the match. He just stopped halfway through the match. And there was this moment when Ben took him out of bounds and kind of doubled him onto the ground, and he just walked back and did one of these. And I was like, man, that's just like a dope move right there. And someone like this guy he's wrestling has probably never felt that before. And if you just looked at both guys, 10 out of 10 non-wrestlers would say, oh, that guy's going to win.
Mm-hmm. So, and you kind of mentioned it, and I wanted to bring this up a little bit later, but, you guys have seen the sport change a lot, both of you, Tony and Joe. How much different is it, how much of a difference do you see in kids that are coming out of high school now, and how ready they are to compete and the level that they're at? How much of a difference do you see now versus, when you guys competed, or even say 10, 15 years ago? And what do you attribute that to?
You or me, Tony?
I'll go. I'll take it. I think we were babies. When I came, I graduated from high school in 1985, so I'm even a generation ahead of Joe. But I look back, and there were a couple kids that were pretty mature that were doing really good things. But I think availability to coaching, I really actually do. Everybody kind of says this, but I think Flow has really contributed to that. And then what Flow forced USA Wrestling to do, which is basically just get a lot of content out there. But it's not just the wrestling; it's also the mindset, the attitude, the technique. You know, who would have heard of play wrestling before? I'd never heard of such a thing. My dad would scoff. He was a coach. My dad would scoff at play wrestling, right? I mean, you basically hit the move a couple times and you kind of went live with it, right? You wouldn't play wrestle for an hour. So I think availability and communication, right? So all of the platforms and social media and stuff like that are getting kids connected and getting kids connected to really good coaching. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think part of it is mindset. Like, I know when I went to college, I just expected I'm going to take this is going to be a tough first year. And I think kids now, part of it's coaching, it's being able to watch the next level. It's kids, I think, now believe that they can go and be successful right off the bat. And that's such a huge piece of it. If you love it and you believe you can do it, and you've had the right coaches in your ear, and you just expect to win, then you're gonna be better off for it. And you guys up in PA too, there's a club on every corner, and people have access to All-Americans and national champs, Olympians, and when those people and having the toughness in workout partners is one thing, but having those guys that are in your ear saying that stuff, then all of a sudden it's real. You can do it.
Yeah, I think a great example of that was in Fargo. You know, Sonny Abe has been in the Pittsburgh area for quite some time now. You know, he coaches at North Allegheny now. He still runs his club and everything. And he was out in Fargo as one of the Team Pennsylvania coaches, which is what I was doing last summer for Fargo, right? And Sonny and I are bouncing around, and a kid I knew from Maryland is like, asked who, you know, Sonny and I stood there and had a conversation. We kind of parted ways. The kid from Maryland asked me, like, hey, who was that? That's Sonny Abe. He's like, wait, like, the one that was an Olympian, you know? And I'm like, yeah, he won a national title at Penn State, was an Olympian and everything. He's like, how do you know him? Like, I've known him since I was a kid. Like, he's just, you know, and that's one of those things, the older that I get, you know, and I'm only 27, but the older I get, the more I realize the proximity to that stuff in wrestling hotbeds is insane. You know, parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, you know, parts of New York, like, and it's so interesting because I think wrestling is a unique sport in that you can go to literally like kids tournaments and see guys that won NCAA titles or were Olympians. You know, I can remember when I was an athlete at Lehigh, you know, John Hughes helped coach his son's youth league team. Mm-hmm. And it's just so funny. I'm like, you have a guy that's a current Division I coach, a guy that won a national title, that's done all these things, and he's sitting here in this powdered, crappy gym coaching youth wrestling.
Yeah, it's awesome. I remember when I was out in California, at the tournaments there's oftentimes a clinic before for an hour. You know, kids can go and you get some technique. And I was running it, and Daniel Cormier was over there, and this is right when he was already a big name in mixed martial arts, and well, he was at all the tournaments, like this superstar, not only in wrestling now, but in any combat sport. You know who Daniel Cormier is. I feel like if you're in some place like Pennsylvania, Jim's probably got 15 All-Americans walking around coaching different clubs.
Yeah, like one of the perfect examples. So you know the Stout brothers. Luke just graduated. He's headed to Princeton. His younger brother, and Luke won a state title this year in Pennsylvania. And his younger brother Mac was a runner-up this year as a sophomore. Their dad Brian was a 4-time All-American at Clarion, right? And he was a 3 times at
whatever the weight was, 190, whatever is 197 now, and then at senior year heavyweight. Now, Bryant, you look at him, it's very evident he's still in extremely good shape, and he's not somebody you would ever want to mess with. But other than that, the way he carries himself, the way he talks, you would never in your life know that this dude was, 4-time All-American, and he lets his kids' coaches coach their kids and everything. And I think that, again, is a perfect example of somebody I'm like, Brian's just another dad in here, and that's just such a crazy thing to think about. But, it's one of the things that makes our sport special is that people do stay around.
On the other end of the spectrum, you have David Taylor, who is actively, seeking an Olympic championship, and he's coaching these kids. And imagine how those kids, if you're part of his program, it's not a dad who did this thing in years past. It's a very legitimate Olympic title contender who they're seeing train, who they're seeing his lifestyle, and they're going to emulate that, right? So it's an interesting that's an interesting other side of it too. I mean, I don't know that a lot of that was happening where you had Olympic caliber athletes training younger kids while they were training. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but maybe not where they had a club going, while they were training.
Right, and I think that's with RTCs. I think that's one of the things that obviously RTC athletes aren't necessarily the ones that are coaching every practice, but what RTCs, one of the many things they have enabled is accessibility, right? You have young kids that can regularly go see, if you're in Nebraska, you can go see Burroughs all the time, if you're a member of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, you can go see Taylor, or, Jake Varner, who just finished his career, or Franklin Gomez, all these guys. So, I guess there's a question in and of itself, I mean, for both of you guys, but Joe, I'll go to you first. You've really seen RTCs grow from the inception, right? From where Sunkissed Kids was it. There was a time, and I can remember as a kid where I actually remember as a kid I wanted a Sunkissed Kids t-shirt so bad because they were the club, man. That was the coolest thing ever. And now, in a good way, they're everywhere. They're enabling people to train. So, having kind of grown through it and watched it happen, what are your thoughts on the way RTCs have grown, and what do you see in the future?
All right, thank you. It's great. It feels like to me that we have more and more high level athletes, places for people to go when they're done college and be supported to keep wrestling. I think that's the most important part. It also that's another team or club for kids to get behind or to go train next to. And I feel like every year I'm learning about new ones. So now what's tough is probably it does seem like a situation where the rich are going to get richer. Some of these RTCs are just everything takes money, everything takes energy, and there's a handful that probably take 95% of the best wrestlers coming out of college. But that's just like in I think most things in life. So you force competition, but they're outstanding. It's got to be one of the reasons why in the last. I mean, you look from what the time you're saying wrestling, how we were competing in 2009 versus we are today is tremendously different. Me and Tony, we went to some of those world championships together, like Denmark and Moscow, I believe. And some of those days were really tough. And now we have guys sitting at home that might win a world title, especially with the Olympic year coming up.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, I think Joe talked through that really well, but what, on your side of it, from behind the lens, what do you think?
I think anything we can do to support the athletes is great. And the more we can do, that's great. I do like the fact that there is crossover between the clubs and the RTCs. And I think bringing up the clubs is an important component to this, because it's not just RTCs, right? You can wrestle at an RTC, but also rep a club like Titan Mercury, right? Which they have a lot of athletes in that club, so they're helping financially and with gear and with travel at least. And so I think anything we can do to support the athletes is great. I do think that the NCAA RTC thing is not over yet, and that the NCAA is a little bit woke to, who's in the room at what time, and how some systems are gaming a little bit. And I wouldn't even say it's gaming. They're just kind of doing like, well, if you don't tell us we can't do it, then we're going to have, these college athletes wrestling with RTC folks and stuff. So I think that there's probably something that's going to come to a head there, and we've been hearing about that. But I think it's good, and I think supporting the athletes in any way we can, and getting the younger athletes in the room with the older athletes, I think is only going to benefit us as a country, for sure.
Yeah, totally agreed.
It wasn't Iowa Hawkeyes had Hawkeye Wrestling Club. That had to be a huge contributor to their success in the Gable era, right? They were kind of, I guess they weren't called an RTC at the time, but bring in world level athletes, you let them mix it up, and especially then when there's fewer regulations, it's going to benefit. It's going to benefit the college program, absolutely.
Yeah, and seeing Gable train, this has been after he was done. I mean, he was still trained. Like seeing Gable train, even though he wasn't competing. I mean, everybody knows that he would crush an exercise bike harder than anybody, right? And just seeing that mindset and attitude and stuff, and having him around, even after he sort of retired from coaching. Or was working with the freestyle kids. I mean, yeah, I think all of that contributes to it. But the question to you guys is like, are we catching up to Russia and Eastern Europe in terms of is all of this? Are we in fact? And I'll answer my own question. Like, I think we are. I think we're catching up, but I still think we have a little ways to go to catch up to how they're doing it, how they're bringing up young athletes and getting them ready, the Sejulayas of the world,
Yeah, interesting. So I was talking to Amit Elor. She's from California, Tony. I don't know if you know her. She's a cadet medalist. And we had a similar conversation. She had gone over to Japan. To train with their women. And I thought she had a really good take, we don't necessarily need to do it like they're doing. We can maybe take bits and pieces, but we don't have to do it just like they are. I think whatever the United States has been doing the last 10 years has bridged the gap for sure. Now, I'm so used to Russia having a medal at most weight classes. In 2010, we had 0 in freestyle, right, Tony? And we had 2 in 2009.
Yeah, it sounds right.
We're doing significantly better than that, and we have, like I said, several guys at each weight class that could do damage. So I don't think we're there yet, but we won a world title in 2017.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I love the fact you look at Snyder as an example. Like, we're winning the Olympics at a younger age. These aren't 32-year-olds, like men who are aging out. I mean, we're talking about younger generation of kids that are winning world and Olympic medals, which is awesome. So I think that is testament to a system that's working pretty well.
What do you think, Mason? You've been right there in the middle of it. Your career's going on right alongside this, the resurgence of USA Wrestling.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was interesting is, and because I thought about this a lot, I don't know what I think drove this, but there was a period of time, even within wrestling,
in my career. Like, I've always been a wrestling nerd. I mean, I talk a lot in general, but, you know, if you get me going on wrestling, it may never stop, right? So there was a period of time, though, where even amongst really high-level guys, it wasn't cool to be a wrestling nerd. It, like, somehow, even in the wrestling world, somehow loving wrestling to that degree, like, wasn't cool. And maybe that was just the age we were at. I don't know, but it felt like that there was almost you know what I mean? It almost like fell out of being a cool thing to do, to really go full throttle on wrestling. And maybe it's because of the exposure. Maybe it's because we've normalized, you know, we've heard the human side of so many of these senior level athletes, not just that are competing now, that are competing, that competed in past eras, right? Like, think about how many kids now have heard Royce Alger stories, right? You know, and that's, and, you know, Royce is a lunatic in the best possible way, but you have such a larger human element to it. And I think that for kids that are coming through the sport now, you know, wrestling is a really hard sport. It does things to you mentally, physically, emotionally, that a lot of other sports don't do, just because it's individualized and you add the weight cutting side of it, and you just kind of never get away from it, right? So I think that the fact that our sport has been able to humanize our most elite athletes, whether if you want to talk about the interviews that the major publications do on the internet that everybody can access, whether you want to talk about stuff like what the NCAA does with athletes reading letters and getting emotional and telling their stories, I think that's been a really big part of it, because I think that it allows 10-year-old kids to look at it and go, hey, I'm just like these guys. You know, I can do this. Like, you know, I talked to Willie Miklas the other day, and he's a great example of somebody that was a 4-time All-American. He was incredibly good. And somebody like, and obviously, you know, a sad story, but you get up there and you see a guy that is a gladiator, and he gets up there and he cries, and you understand that he misses his dad. And that speaks to something a lot greater than just like, man, it would be really cool to win an Olympic gold medal. Like, well, yeah, obviously it is. But when you humanize it, which we've been able to do in our sport, it's made it real for a whole new, now multiple generations of kids. And I think, again, it's somehow, some way that's made it cool again. Like, there is now a whole wrestling culture, and, you know, and there's all sorts of offshoots to it, right? Kids collect shoes and do all that stuff now, but there is a whole culture of being a wrestling nerd, and it's a cool thing to do. So I think that has been a big help. From the technical development side, on the men's side, I think RTCs and the growth of club wrestling, you know, what the Edge started, what those guys at Edge started has just exploded. You know, it's been incredible. Even when I started wrestling, clubs, even back then, were pretty few and far in between in a place like Pennsylvania. You know, in Pennsylvania, Rob Waller's and on the western side of the state, that was it. You know, Robbie's dad, Coach Waller, ran All-American, and people drove all sorts of lengths of time to get there. And now you don't have to drive any more than a half hour, 40 minutes if you don't want to get to practice. So the growth of club wrestling has been a huge part of it. I don't know what led to this, you know, whether it's these individuals wanting to give back or somebody developing the relationship. But people like Andy Barth and Art Mortori can't go unmentioned in this either, because literally none of it's possible without them.
Yeah, and Novogratz.
And yeah, Novogratz. You know, these people that are the financial backing to the clubs you mentioned, like Tight Mercury, Tony, and Sunkissed Kids and all these things. Literally none of it exists without individuals like that. You look at the other side of it, you have Beat the Streets that has enabled so many things, not just the events like Wrestling Times Square, but they've given kids opportunities. You know, and then on the women's side, I think we're developing really, really well. You know, women's wrestling is still a young sport. Like, not just in the United States, it's just a young sport, right? It's only been in the Olympics for 20 years. So I think it's been really cool. It's frustrating at times because growth is never as fast as you want it to be. We all understand women's wrestling is the future, girls and women's wrestling is the future, and that there's a huge market for it. And you see people like Helen and Adeline, and I mean, there's just a laundry list. Tamara, Jakara Winchester is, probably the best example of this ultra bright young star in our sport right now on the women's side. So I think things have changed a lot, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Joe. I was fortunate enough to spend a few weeks in Japan training at one point with their world and Olympic team. We had athletes from all over the world come into Lehigh, my time there. And we do things differently, but I think that's good, right? Americans wrestle differently. Russians wrestle differently. Iranians wrestle differently. And I think that one of the things about our sport that's such a beautiful thing is that you can be wonderfully you, right? You can be unique, and make the absolute most of it. So I don't think we need to overhaul our system to continue to catch the Russians and Iranians. I just think we need to continue to refine it and be open-minded about these are things we can adopt, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts there. Back to Novogratz and Barth and like that. Thank goodness for those guys. And we were talking about Askren earlier. We lost. I believe we lost Ben because he wasn't going to be able to support his family the way that he wanted to with wrestling, and what he's doing today is working. But now he can make money all sorts of different ways because his brand is so big and everybody knows who Ben Askren is. Now, that said, we have to keep building the economy in wrestling, making wrestling cooler, bring in money from outside sponsors. So we don't want to have to rely on a couple guys with deep pockets.
No.
But I think that it is starting to work. Right after Ben left, there's all sorts of media outlets. Jordan Burroughs is a big, our top athletes, more and more people can be supported through sponsorships and things like that. Social media has been great for wrestling. My point was just that we got to keep building that side of things, keep doing like what you're doing, what both of you guys are doing, and make it sustainable without some mega rich dudes.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that has enabled that, with RTCs, you'll inherently have a tie to a collegiate program, right? So there are certain people that will donate to USA Wrestling, or again, like Sunkist Kids was really the first of its kind. But what RTCs have done, and this is so important for the growth of our sport, is you tap into different donor bases. You know what I mean? You can get people like the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. There are Penn State people that are willing to help David Taylor chase that dream because he's a Penn State guy and he's still effectively representing, Penn State, and as opposed to would they have donated to USA Wrestling? Let's be honest, probably not, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about all these reasons, or that we're catching other countries. It'd be interesting to see how much our results, if we had a graph of our results, and then the amount of money that was going to support athletes, if they'd correlate. I'm sure that they would.
Yeah. Oh, almost directly, you would have to think, right?
Yeah.
So, you mentioned all the world travels that you guys have taken together, and Joe, you've literally circumnavigated the globe through the sport. After you graduated from Missouri, what was the process if you ended up in the wrestling media, the journalism world? How did that come to be? And just talk about the journey, man. It's been a wild one.
Yeah. So I graduated with a degree in education from University of Missouri. Right after college, I decided there's like this 6-month program at the Metropolitan Community College in Kansas City for firefighting, and I'd been really interested in that, so I went and did that. I got my firefighter 1 and 2 and my EMT basic, and had just got in the hiring process. So right when that school ended, Then Ben called me. He's been a big part of my life for a thing, just being buddies with him. And Ben had talked to Martin Floriani, who had started Flow about a year earlier, maybe 14 months earlier. And he said, hey, that Martin guy's wanting to have someone take over wrestling so he can work on the business. And so I called him up, and just like a week or two later, he happened to be driving through right past my Blue Springs, Missouri. We stopped and chatted and decided it'd be a good idea to meet him at NCAAs. I went to the NCAAs. It was 2008 with zero experience. I'd never interviewed anybody. I never really used video cameras, and it was a anxiety-filled experience, but one that was awesome. I had kind of, I'd lost touch with wrestling. I actually, I wasn't a huge wrestling. I didn't like it anymore, I guess, when, at the end of it. And it just all of a sudden, I realized how important the sport is. And look, I get the opportunity to talk to all these guys. It was insane. That first weekend. And then the more I talked to Martin and get to know him, there was something about him. I wanted to be around him. He had a really good energy, and knowing that I'm just going to get to travel around. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work. It was a ton of work, but getting to travel around the world and hang out with cool people that I looked up to, it was pretty easy to make the decision. That happened about a month after that NCAAs. I went on 3 trips with Martin, where I did NCAAs, high school nationals, Reno Worlds, and then the first coverage was Central Valley in California, right when Fresno State dropped their program. And Martin really tried to talk me out of it on that last flight home. I just think he was testing me. And I told him I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better than he does. I moved down to Austin for a significant decrease in salary at the time. But, I mean, it's been so great meeting guys, like hanging out with Tony. Any big event, Tony's there. There'd be a certain group of people, and it was just a blast. I met my wife covering wrestling. So it's impacted my life a ton. But yeah, the beginning was just a whirlwind, and just kind of only happened because of my relationship with Ben.
So you mentioned the early days. Everybody sees the coverage that goes on in wrestling now, and the production value is pretty high. And at the beginning, I can remember it was literally you guys running around with video cameras. With a press pass and a video camera, and you just did what you could. I remember seeing it up close and personal at Iron Man in the early years. Talk about even compare and contrast almost like the growth of the coverage of wrestling, and it doesn't have to specifically be Flow, but just how much it's changed and what really drove that.
Yeah, so there's like different phases maybe. Flow grew originally just mostly in terms of people that followed it. There was nowhere to go watch wrestling, so easy. Go film matches and interview people. Go get a Tom Brand's interview at the time. It's goldmine. Everybody wanted to see it, and so that at the beginning there wasn't a lot of money, but there started to be a lot of eyeballs. And so just getting on video was a thing. Now, the community had grown, but there still wasn't much money being made. And so the production of anything wasn't getting better at all. There was still no live. Live was the next piece. We had this backpack. You might remember this backpack that was, we could go live wherever we were. Half the time it didn't work, but when it worked, man, people loved it. And it was actually the, Flo had started that subscription model with Technique Wave.
Yep.
And it would get like 2 or 3. One day it had 11 signups, and that's actually like, whoa, there's something to this. There wasn't ads all over, but there's some money coming in, and it's important. It's important to have that money to make the productions better. So then it was the first live event, Dake versus Taylor at the All-Star Duel. First behind the paywall event. A lot of people were like really pissed about it, but I think that event changed the landscape by itself. It was very successful compared to anything that Flo had ever done at the time. I mean, successful enough that we knew that the model was changing that night. Live events. It's got to be live events. And now there's tons of live events, and the production is really good. It's instead of one guy with a live backpack that didn't work, garbage camera, to multiple camera angles, graphics. There's people back in Austin that are taking care of any technical problems. There's announcers, and the subscription model has been so good to wrestling. A lot of people are upset that it costs some money, but it's the only thing that got us out of like the Stone Age.
Right.
Yeah, and so Flo changed a lot. I really missed some aspects, like there was lots of coverages with all sorts of clubs at any level. But as soon as you find out what's working and then hone in on that, and a lot of times it's the big schools and big storylines, but that's just because that's what people want to watch. But I know that that's a really good $150 spent for me as a wrestling fan, and I think people should appreciate it. Yeah, so live video, subscription. I think that's what kind of took Flo, and even before that, Russian Nationals, 2008.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna bring that up.
2008 Russian Nationals. So just being different, and everybody wanted to know, or thought they wanted to know why the Russians were so good. So those are kind of some big steps. And then of course Mark Bader. He's he was a crusher. As soon as he came over to FloWrestling, it kind of had a different feel, double the energy. But yeah, those are my phases, I would say.
There's one video that always stands out in my head amongst all these others that I laugh about, that if you want to point to even a few years into Flo, when things were building and you guys had a big following, the way that you guys traveled. And I can't remember if it was you or Martin, but it was for Pennsylvania States in 2010. One of you guys flew in, and Wayne Yan picked you up. It might have been Martin, but he picked one of you guys up in an old beater, and I vividly
that was Martin.
Do you remember the name of the car? Because the name of the video was Living the Dream, and I don't remember what the name of the car was. It was some old Dodge thing that they hadn't made in 20 years.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm gonna have to go watch that. Wayne was awesome. I understand a really big part of the Pennsylvania landscape for a while.
Yeah, there's a guy that man, I miss him a lot. Huge Penn State fan, but my goodness, if you talk about somebody that would literally give the shirt off his back to any kid that wrestled for any reason, Wayne would give you the shirt off his back, not because he thought you needed the shirt, but because he thought you would look better in it. He really was. He was such a uniquely giving human. And it was, really sad we lost him too soon. He kind of got sick and things happened quickly, but he was awesome, man. That raspy voice was always excited. And
Wayne Danger, is that right?
Wayne Danger, that was the club.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had some good teams, man. We had a team there where
that we had 4 or 5 guys that ended up being All-Americans wrestling in those freaking Scooby-Doo singlets.
Nice. Yeah, he actually 2 years, I think, he was just part of the Flow team.
Mm-hmm.
One was he and Martin, and another year it was the 3 of us, and we saw that he did interviews with all the semifinalist winners that he could one round, and we thought it was funny. He started every single interview. He said, "Well, you punched your ticket to the finals," and just while that's what it said, and over the course of an evening in a hotel room, just got funnier and funnier. But yeah, I don't even know how Martin ran into him. Martin's really at finding the right kind of person that loved wrestling and want to contribute. Like Wayne is Zeb Miller, Gene Stevens, just really outstanding people that I think Flow, the contributors, is another reason why Flow is good. I remember when it started to go from, hey, it's only what I could shoot on the weekends to, every week Zeb would send in a coverage and Gene Stevens would do something, and all of a sudden it built like a really good foundation of contributors.
Yeah, I dug up the video, by the way. It was a Dodge Omni.
Oh, nice.
with no radio in it, and he did like a Cribs episode, except for a car in there, I think.
Yeah. Oh man. So I'd be curious for both of you guys. You've been on a lot of international trips together. What do you think is like the most ridiculous or most memorable trip you guys have been on together?
Well, for me, one of the funnest, and it kind of speaks. So we were at Ironman, and Joe, you were with me, right, when we stayed over at Zeb's that night? And I hadn't been brought into that kind of inner circle of this sort of very startup mentality where it's like, well, you don't get a hotel room if somebody can host you, and if it's somebody awesome like Zeb, then you take that opportunity even if you're sleeping on a sofa. So I hadn't been brought into that too much, and anytime I walked around the gym with Joe, I was meeting like hundreds of people. They all wanted to shake his hand, or he would introduce me to Division I college coaches, that sort of thing. But anyways, it was an Ironman, and Zeb lived about 10 miles from the venue, and we all stayed over at his place, and it was pretty awesome. Like, just, this is how the startup feel is functioning, and the one thing that stood out is that there were black squirrel that used to live
Yeah.
in the area, and there were some black squirrel in the freezer because they were being used to make stew.
Yeah.
Did you have squirrels too?
I remember who was hunting them and cooking it too. I don't know.
Yeah. That person will remain nameless, but no, we had pizza and a really big roaring fire, and we put wrestling on and just hung out and drank beer and eat pizza, and in front of this big fire. Zeb's a big fire guy, and just it really, really spoke to me. And it's not like I sought them out to sleep on the sofa, too much more after that. I could kind of afford hotel rooms and stuff like that, but that trip was really pretty special. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, well, I think again that was part of the fun. Is part of it's Zeb, part of it's the experience. There was if you didn't put. We didn't put cheese on our hamburger, We saved all the money we could. A ton of good stuff happened. So, like that night it's Zeb. Another night you might be at Tom Ryan's house, or you end up making really, really good friends. So access gets easy. Well, having friends is the best part. Getting access when a stressful time like NCAA, or getting the behind the scenes footage, all that bootstrapping was really important piece for FloWrestling.
So now you're running your own outfit. You've got Gro Wrestling. You're all over the place, especially in the Midwest. Talk about that. Talk about when you decided that was what you wanted to do, moving forward. Talk about Gro Wrestling and what really, when you envision, like, this is exactly what I want to make, from now on, what's kind of the core values of Gro Wrestling, and talk about what you guys do.
Cool. So, let's see. I moved to Kansas City a year ago in January. It was the March before that. I was in Missouri watching my brother coach his state tournament. And Jason Heslup, he's a co-founder at Blue Chip.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to hang out and chat for a while, so he runs some really good events. There was 6 of them at the time, I believe, but they'd started to grow. And he's busy with his business, so he asked if I wanted to come on board and start working on those events. I never run an event before, but I was around a lot. I have a lot of friends that run tournaments that can be resources. It worked out well because I was in Austin at the time. Didn't need to be. It's a city it's one of the best cities on the planet, but I'd been there for 10 years. My family lives here in Kansas City, and so why not? Like, here's something that I can do right now. It's in wrestling, and a big pro was it would be a reason to start doing content again. I can run these tournaments, and I can start to develop content and build a community around it. The community will come to the tournaments, and so it just seemed to be a good fit. Is also something new, something to. And it said the tournaments had existed in the past, but Gro Wrestling would be something completely new. And now it's an opportunity. Now I have an opportunity to do something, and I don't know if control is the right word, but it's I'm going to be making the decisions on it, on what goes on, and that feels good. I like the idea of also contributing to an area of the country that is extremely important to me.
Whoa, we are back for another episode of the Home Advantage.
It's funny, like going back to the Missouri State Tournament or even the events that we host, and it's like, it's so wild how all these people that are, they're walking around the concourse. I saw them doing that.
And he is now running
25 years ago. It's just now that their grandpa, instead of the young coach, and I think that we're going to impact this area, and I do want to do go out and travel and do content other places, but we can have a good focus right here in Kansas City and help contribute to building an area that's pretty dang tough.
Really entertaining. All right, I'm gonna.
That's awesome, man. Really the last question I got for you, and it kind of popped into my head, and we slid away from the topic, but you talk about how much better true freshmen are coming out of school now. So I got a question for both you guys. You both been covering the sport for a while. Put you on the spot. Who's the best true freshman you've ever seen?
That's true freshman.
College freshman? Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Cox was pretty good.
Cox was pretty good.
I'll tell you, so I'll go first. Give you guys some time to think. For my money, I'd go Dustin Schlater. Schlater was the guy that kind of got lost to. Time wasn't kind to him, and to no fault of his own. He went.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, he went first, third. He lost to Gregor Gillespie in the semis as a sophomore. Was kind of the overwhelming favorite that year, if memory serves. But Schlater was so good coming out. I remember him in high school. He just smashed everyone.
That's right.
And then
his freshman year in the finals, he beat Oklahoma State, right?
I thought he beat an Iowa guy.
Oh, I can't even. Why can't I think of the name?
Was he Eustace?
No,
Well, he beat Esposito at one point.
Esposito, yeah, who I thought was like the best wrestler of all time for a while, or just was unstoppable at the time.
Yeah, and Schlater, the thing with Schlater was, the injuries in later years, you never got to see, and Metcalf obviously missed some time there early because of the red shirt, then the last year because of the transfer, but, it's kind of sucks. We were all, as wrestling fans, robbed of a rivalry that was great in high school, that would have been incredible in college, because Schlater's health just didn't hold up. But for my money, it was Schlater. He was just so incredibly consistent, literally from day one.
What you got, Tony? I don't know if that's a decision.
I don't have a lot in my arsenal for when you guys put me on the spot like that.
Sorry.
I thought Dake was pretty good, right? He was a true freshman, right? At one. So my mind kind of went there with Dake. But I remember Schlater, and I remember how tough he was. He was a solid kid for sure.
Well, I almost got to. The reason I can't, Cale Sanderson, obviously he never lost when he was a true freshman. Is this their first year of eligibility or true freshman?
True freshman.
Okay, then it wouldn't be. How many wrestlers have ever went undefeated their true freshman year? I mean, that's really, if you want to use
undefeated as a true freshman, man, has it ever happened? Pat
Smith, right? Or did he redshirt maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. I did put a thing out. I will say this: Pat Smith has to be one of the most underdiscussed, best ever people of our sport. He was so good. Foreshadowing 4 titles.
Yeah, and doing amazing things for wrestling now. Arkansas had, what I talked to him last year at Fargo, that I think they took 4 guys the first year. They have 80 some guys now.
That's awesome.
Behind a Division I program. Wrestling's a thing now. Mm-hmm. And I see him that Arkansas brings a bunch of guys to this fall brawl event we run, and guys are winning it. They're finishing high, so not only is their sport growing there, but they're tough.
Yeah.
Thank you, Smith. Thank you, Pat Smith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, all right, final answer, Joe. What do you got?
Do you want to hear the list of the most recent 5 NCAA winners as a true freshman?
Yeah.
Tion Ware in 03, Schlater in 06, Dake in 10, Jaden in 14, and Miles Martin in whenever this was posted, 2016.
I was going to say, I remember watching Ware and Esposito when he was a freshman. This might not have been their true freshman year. Wrestled 141, and I think Esposito won in the Big 12 finals, and then Ware won in the NCAA. But just such an awesome match. What a stud! I got a Missouri boy, Jaden Cox.
There you go.
I was gonna say, I thought that'd be easy for you.
Yeah. Not so easy. Jaden Cox, man, what a hammer! Can't wait to watch him wrestle. It's a shame that we're not getting the Olympics as scheduled, but I guess we get an extra year to create some drama.
I know. I feel like all of our heads are gonna be ready to explode by the time it rolls around, but it's gonna be fun, man.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's all I got. I think we've kept you for long enough. Tony, you got anything else?
Just a shout out to your family, Joe, and your brother James, who's doing some really solid work as a high school coach, which takes a lot of passion. And he's, if I'm not wrong, he's had some pretty immediate success with his kids. Yeah, they really love him and buy into his system and stuff. Does he have state champions? Is that correct?
I mean, this year he had 2. Last year he had 2. He's had Jarrett J. Hughes was a 4-time state champ that came out. Now he only wrestled there 2 years. Brock Mahler, 4-time state champ, came out of Tolton Catholic. Teague Travis, he won his 3rd state title this year as a junior, committed to Oklahoma State now. In the match, he got choked out unconscious.
I saw that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean he was passed out before he got turned, but man, most officials would have called the fall. My brother told me he went to the center of the mat and Teague's eyes finally opened. I can't even believe they let him keep wrestling. And James said, "I'll never forget the moment. I just looked at him and said, Teague, you're in the state finals. You have 1 minute left." And he said, he looked right through him and he said, "Am I winning?" And then he went ahead and won.
Wow.
But most importantly, I think the program didn't have a lot of attention. It wasn't a big thing at Tolton Catholic, and now wrestling is important at the school, so he's done his job.
That's awesome. Great to hear. It's not easy, and high school coaching can be a thankless job. It's nice when you have state champions and you have kids in the room that really want to work hard. But man, it takes a lot of commitment to really be up and ready to go every day. And man, I'm praying that we get to start the season as planned and have a high school season. It's big if, but yeah, I hope it happens.
Yeah, it's tough. We Gro Wrestling has canceled three events, which is the right thing to do. And I think I hope that our next events are as planned. We have September, October, and December, but that they're not just going to happen if legally we can do it. We're going to do it when it's safe and when it's smart.
Nice.
It's unfortunate, but I want to help be a solution, not a problem.
Yeah. Right on, man.
Well, all right, fellas. Hey, I really appreciate it. Joe, appreciate you so much, man. Always good to talk. Go way back to the Iron Man days. Tony's got photo evidence of it.
It's true.
I remember the moment I met you. I think I told you about it, where I was waiting to watch this kid Mason Beckman wrestle. You actually said hi to me, and I was like, you said something. And I was like, oh, I'm going to watch Mason Beckman's coming up. And you're like, I'm Mason Beckman.
Was that before I wrestled the kid from Calvary Chapel? No, I knew you before then. I don't remember when that was, but that's funny.
Yeah, that was the thing. But no, man, I had a blast. Thanks for asking me. I feel like I was not getting my thoughts out the best, but let's do it again sometime. You're the man, Mason, and thanks for HMA. I was digging through. I'm gonna go listen to a bunch of podcasts. I'm actually looking into do podcast stuff, so maybe I'll get some ideas. And then Tony, man, my brother Tony, I love you. You always have my back when I'm in trouble, and it's always a blast to be near you. Looking forward to be at events again to see my homeboys, and then man, you're the best photographer in the game.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it very much.
All right, fellas. Take it easy, guys. Stay safe.
All right, guys. See ya.
Bye, Tony.
Bye.